I didn't lose her in one moment. That's the part people don't understand. There was no explosion, no final argument, no slammed doors. She left slowly, and I let her. The night it became obvious, we were sitting on opposite ends of the couch. The TV was on, muted. We'd been doing that a lot, using noise to avoid saying anything real. She looked at me the way people look at someone they've already explained themselves to too many times. "I'm tired," she said. Not sleepy, something else. Her name was Julia. We'd been together almost 4 years. Long enough that people assumed permanence. Short enough that we still told ourselves we had time. I used to think being easygoing was a strength, not fighting, not demanding, not pushing. But over time I realized something uncomfortable. I wasn't easygoing. I was absent. Julia wanted plans, not big ones, just direction. She wanted to know what we were building toward. And every time she asked, I gave her a version of patience instead of an answer. "We're good," I'd say. "Why rush? Let's just see how things go." She stopped nodding at those words a while ago. The truth was simple. I liked my life exactly as it was. My job was stable. My routine predictable. My independence untouched. Loving her fit into my life, but only as long as it didn't require me to rearrange anything. One evening, a few weeks before that quiet night on the couch, she asked me something that should have been easy. "Do you see yourself marrying me?" I didn't say no, which felt kinder, but I didn't say yes either, and silence is louder than rejection. She waited, longer than she should have. I remember thinking she'd eventually adjust, lower her expectations, meet me where I was comfortable. I didn't realize then what that meant. That night on the couch, she finally said it. "I feel like I'm the only one arguing for this relationship." I opened my mouth to disagree, then closed it, because she wasn't wrong. "I love you," I said instead. She nodded. "I know," she replied. "That's not the problem." We sat there, listening to the muted television pretend something was happening. My chest felt tight, not with fear of losing her, with fear of being asked to choose. "I don't want to pressure you," she said quietly, "but I can't keep waiting for a life you might never want." That sentence didn't break me. It unsettled me, which was worse. After that night, nothing officially ended. We still slept in the same bed, still made plans, still smiled in public. But something had shifted. She stopped leaning into me. I noticed and said nothing. I told myself I was being patient. What I was really doing was hoping she'd stay without me changing. A few days later, I came home early. Her coat was gone, not forever, just not where it usually was. And for the first time, a thought crossed my mind that I pushed away immediately. What if she's already leaving? I didn't chase the thought. I didn't ask the question. I didn't argue for us. And that choice, the one I didn't make, would matter more than anything. I started noticing things I'd ignored for years. Small changes, the kind that don't announce themselves. Julia stopped asking what time I'd be home. She stopped reminding me about things we used to plan together. Trips we talked about, but never booked. Friends' weddings we used to discuss like hypotheticals. Now she just handled things herself. I told myself that was maturity, independence. I didn't recognize it as withdrawal. One evening, I came home to find her sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop open. She wasn't working. She was looking at apartments. Not aggressively, just scrolling. Calm, focused. I leaned against the counter. "Thinking of moving?" I asked, trying to sound casual. She looked up. "Thinking of options," she said. That word stuck with me. Options. We didn't fight. That's what made it dangerous. Fights imply engagement. We were past that. A few days later, we had dinner with friends. A couple we'd known since before Julia and I met. They were engaged. Everyone clapped, asked questions, made jokes about wedding stress. Someone turned to us. "So, when are you two making it official?" I smiled. Julia didn't. She laughed politely, but her eyes didn't join in. "Whenever he's ready," she said. It sounded light. It wasn't. On the drive home, the silence was thick. Finally, she spoke. "I hate being the punchline." That hit harder than anger would have. I wanted to explain myself, tell her I wasn't against marriage, I just wasn't ready. But the truth underneath that felt uglier. I wasn't sure I ever would be. That night, lying next to her, I realized something uncomfortable. I loved her, but not enough to risk changing my life. And love that doesn't risk anything is just comfort wearing a better name. The next week, she stayed late at work, then later, then stopped texting updates. I told myself not to read into it, but my chest knew better. One night, she came home with boxes. Not many, just books, clothes, things she could carry herself. I found a place, she said, close enough to make it feel reasonable, far enough to make a point. I nodded, too quickly. Like this was something we'd discussed, like this was mutual. I'm not leaving you, she added. I'm stepping back. I wanted to argue, to promise something, to say the right words, but the moment required certainty, and I didn't have it. So I said the most honest thing I could. I don't want to lose you. She looked at me for a long moment. I know, she said, but wanting isn't the same as choosing. That night, she slept in the guest room. The apartment felt larger, colder, like it had already adjusted to her absence. After she moved out, our conversations became polite, logistical, careful. We acted like people who didn't want to hurt each other, and ended up doing exactly that. I waited for the panic, for the regret, for the moment where I'd suddenly be sure. It didn't come. What came instead was something worse. Relief. And that's when I realized the damage was already done. Not because she left, but because I never fought to keep her. A week later, she asked if we could talk, not to reconcile, just to be honest. I agreed, thinking honesty would be easier than decision. I was wrong. We met at a small cafe near her new place. She looked calmer, like someone who'd stopped holding their breath. I need to know something, she said. Not for closure, for clarity. I nodded, already uneasy. If I had stayed, would you have eventually chosen me? I opened my mouth, and for the first time, I understood not aggressive, not emotional, precise. If I had stayed, would you have eventually chosen me? I looked at her hands wrapped around the coffee cup. They were steady, mine weren't. I wanted to say yes, not because I knew it was true, but because I wanted it to be. The silence stretched, and for the first time in my life, I didn't rush to fill it. I sat with it, let it show me something. I don't know, I said. The words landed quietly, but they carried weight. Julia nodded, not surprised, relieved. That hurt more than disappointment would have. That's what I needed to hear, she said. She didn't cry, didn't argue, didn't try to convince me of anything. She just accepted the truth I'd been too afraid to face myself. We talked for another hour, about ordinary things, work, friends, her new apartment. She didn't ask me to come see it. I didn't offer. When we stood to leave, she hesitated. I hope one day you choose someone, she said. Not because you're afraid to lose them, but because you're ready to stand somewhere instead of hovering. I walked home alone. The streets looked the same, but something in me felt exposed. For weeks after that, I replayed our relationship in fragments, moments I dismissed as minor, questions I deflected, opportunities I treated like pressure instead of invitations. I saw myself clearly for the first time, not as a villain, not as a victim, but as a man who confused emotional neutrality with strength. I realized I'd built my life around optionality, keeping exits visible, never fully settling, always leaving space in case I needed to retreat. And it worked, until it didn't. One evening, months later, I was sitting alone in the apartment we used to share. Her side of the closet was empty, her mug gone, her presence reduced to absence. I wasn't lonely in the way people talk about. I wasn't desperate. I wasn't broken. I was unchosen by myself. That's when the thought hit me. I hadn't lost Julia because I wasn't ready for commitment. I lost her because I was ready to lose her, and I never admitted that out loud. The realization didn't come with panic. It came with clarity, a calm, brutal kind. I started noticing patterns. How often I said maybe when I meant no. How often I delayed decisions, hoping circumstances would decide for me. How often I mistook kindness for engagement. I thought back to that first question she asked years ago. Do you see yourself marrying me? I remembered my silence, how I convinced myself it was thoughtful, mature. It wasn't. It was avoidance. Months passed. I dated casually, nothing serious. Every time something began to deepen, a familiar instinct kicked in. Pull back, slow down, reassess. But now I noticed it, and noticing changed everything. One night, sitting across from someone new, she asked me a simple question. What are you looking for? My old answer hovered on my tongue. Let's see where things go. Instead, I paused, took a breath, and chose honesty. I'm learning how to choose, I said. She smiled. Not impressed, not reassured, just present. I didn't know where that would lead, but for the first time, I wasn't waiting for certainty. I was willing to participate. Sometimes I think about Julia, not with longing, with gratitude. She didn't leave because she stopped loving me. She left because she loved herself enough not to wait forever. I used to believe that love was something you felt. Now I understand it's something you stand in, something you argue for, something you choose, even when it costs you comfort. I didn't choose her, and I live with that. But I stopped living like a man who never chooses at all. Some lessons come quietly, not with heartbreak, but with the steady understanding that the life you don't argue for will eventually move on without you. And this time, I didn't look away from that truth.